Don't let the world know your sorrow, but be like Saroyan. Come on and laugh. Laugh, clown, laugh.
Welcome back to The Place of Places, an in-depth analysis of William Saroyan's 1972 memoir, Places Where I've Done Time. Today, we examine Chapter 13, The Palace Theater, New York, 1928. This chapter only references the Palace Theater at the very end. Built in 1913, it was a vaudeville theater until 1930, at which point it was primarily used for movies. In 1965, it was renovated and reopened for performances, which still play today. Saroyan loved the Palace because he loved vaudeville. Vaudeville was a style of theater popular from the late 1800s until the 1930s. In America, it was akin to a variety show, which consisted of several unrelated acts. These usually included comedy, dance, magicians, and other forms of short sets that could fill an hour. Saroyan tells us that soon after he arrived in New York in 1928, he found the Palace Theater on Broadway, paid a quarter, went to the top balcony, to the last row, and sat down as James Barton sang "Laugh, Clown, Laugh." I just sat back and let the happy variety happen. I just sat there and felt absolutely great and home. He explains that his entire life he was haunted by a sense of sorrow, coupled with humor and the awareness of the craziness of life. He's basically describing the dual moods of comedy and tragedy in theater, so it's not surprising that he was drawn to playwriting as well. That first trip to New York, he spent much time going to shows on Broadway, which heavily affected his work. He had gone to vaudeville in Fresno, but New York was of another caliber. Especially at that time, his writing was very rhythmic, possibly owing in part to the influence of musical theater he had watched in vaudeville. In Nona Balakian's The World of William Saroyan, she studies the influence of vaudeville on Saroyan's work. She references a 1939 review of The Time of Your Life, in which the reviewer, Mary McCarthy, states that almost every incident and character can be translated back into one of the old-time acts. Each character is a stereotype, not unlike the even older framework for commedia dell'arte. And in The Time of Your Life, there are smaller scenes that harken back to the variety show, like the tap dancer looking for work and the barfly singing a song. Balakian concludes that in vaudeville he saw the episodic, disjointed variety and discontinuity, the very core of American life. It was from this fount of the popular culture and major source of entertainment that Saroyan culled his blueprint for the American character, with its traces of touching, often noble heartbreak. She often refers to Love's Old Sweet Song as having been heavily influenced by the parody and paradox of vaudeville. In the story, The Home of the Human Race, Saroyan describes vaudeville theaters like the Liberty, Kinema, Bijou, Strand, Hippodrome, Orpheum in Fresno as places where he could escape from boredom and failure, as passages to grace and meaning. As we've learned, he couldn't tolerate slowing down or becoming bored, so this style certainly fit his personality. The content of this chapter itself is reminiscent of a variety show. He begins by discussing his own deep, ever-present sorrow, then remembers a German band that suddenly showed up on the porch of the Fred Finch orphanage and played a waltz, followed by a description of becoming aroused by a stripper in Cincinnati, and then finally landing on the song Laugh, Clown, Laugh, performed by James Barton at the Palace. To him, these surprises were what gave life meaning, and incidentally aligned very well with the concept of variety shows, which also surprised and delighted. In fact, ending on Laugh, Clown, Laugh brings this chapter full circle, as it is about a clown that is full of sorrow, just like William.
Just be a real Punchinello. Oh, fellow, you're supposed to brighten up and smile. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Paint a lot of smiles around your face and laugh, frown. Don't frown, and don't let the world know your sorrow. But be like Pollyanna. Come on and laugh. Laugh, clown, laugh.
Even if Saroyan hadn't explicitly said that his moods were filled with both humor and sorrow, we can see it in his body of work, which almost always hits on these two paradoxically linked themes. Oftentimes, we see this in his description of his characters, who both struggle to survive and also find the pleasures and comedy in life. In Sons Come and Go, Mothers Hang In Forever, from 1976, he wrote, "I have always been a laugher, disturbing people who are not laughers, upsetting whole audiences at theaters. I laugh, that's all. I love to laugh. Laughter to me is being alive. I've had rotten times and I've laughed through them. Even in the midst of the very worst times, I have laughed." So the palace is perhaps the quintessential symbol for Saroyan, transcending even its physical place. Let's put this on the Saroyan map and move on.